So 2.5 is talking about solving rational equations, and I think that it's probably the most difficult section. So I'm going to work a number of problems from this one. So number one, I have 3 over y minus 2 minus 4 over y plus 1 is equal to 1. And notice how I'm kind of spacing the problems out. Now notice that my LCD is going to be y minus 2 times y plus 1. And you can just, when you multiply the two factors together, that's what you're going to get for your LCD. Now remember, the denominators cannot equal 0, so I have two restricted values here. If y minus 2 cannot equal 0, then y cannot equal 2, adding 2 to both sides. And if y plus 1 cannot equal 0, subtract the 1, y cannot equal negative 1. So those are our two restricted values. Now the only reason you have to know that is because if your answer comes out to be one of those two answers, then you have to discard it, and it's not any good. So now what I want to do is I want to make all of my denominators the same. Now before I do that, I notice that this is subtraction. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this negative and put it up here with the 4, because these problems can get kind of messy, and so that negative can kind of get lost. So I always like to take the negative and put it up with the 4, all right, with the numerator. All right, so let's see. This one has the y minus 2. What is it missing? It's missing the y plus 1. So I'm going to multiply numerator and denominator by y plus 1. This one has the y plus 1. It's missing the y minus 2. So multiply numerator and denominator by y minus 2. Now this one, the denominator is understood to be 1, so it needs everything. So I'm going to multiply it by y plus 1 times y minus 2. And so now all the denominators are the same, so I can discard them. So I will have 3 times y plus 1 minus 4 times y plus 2 is equal to y times y plus 1 times y minus 2. I started to foil in my head before it was time. All right, so now I'm going to distribute. So 3 times y is 3y. 3 times 1 is 3. The sign goes with the number, and this should be y minus 2, not y plus 2, I'm sorry. And then so negative 4 times y is negative 4y. And then negative times negative gives you plus 4 times 2 is 8. And then I'm going to multiply the y times both. So I'm foiling out here. So y times everything, then 1 times everything. So y times y is y squared. Y times negative 2, negative 2y. Y times 1, y. And then 1 times negative 2, negative 2. Now combining my like terms, 3y minus 4y gives me negative y. And 3 plus 8 gives me 11. And then here, the only two that I can combine is the minus 2y and the plus y, which would give me minus y. So whenever you see a y squared, the first thing you think is set it equal to 0. Let's see if we can factor it. So I'm going to add y, and I'm going to subtract 11. So I get 0 is equal to y squared, and then these two cancel. And then that would be minus 13. Now it turns out that I cannot factor this. And so since I can't factor it, I'm going to have to do it by the square root method. So I will add the 13 to both sides. So I get 13 is equal to y squared. And then I take the square root of both sides. And don't forget, when you take the square root, you have to do plus or minus. So my two answers are plus the square root of 13 and minus the square root of 13. Now, I go back and look at my restricted values, and that's not either one of them, and so both of these answers will be good. So that's problem number 1. Okay? Problem number 2 says x over x minus 2 minus 9 over x plus 4 is equal to x squared over x squared plus 2x minus 8. Now, the first thing that I need to do is factor this denominator. So negative 8 is negative 1 times 8, or negative 2 times 4, and this gives me 2, which is what I want. Now, notice that that is, let me get it written down. The same as these two denominators, and that will always be the case. The two denominators, these two denominators multiplied together are going to give you this third denominator whenever you have something that you have to factor. So now again, I'm going to change this to plus and negative 9, and I want to make my denominators the same. And in this case, my LCD is going to be x minus 2 times x plus 4. So that cannot equal 0. So x minus 2 cannot equal 0, adding the 2. And x plus 4 cannot equal 0, so then subtract the 4. So 2 and negative 4 are my two restricted values. So now I'm going to make my LCD x minus 2 times x plus 4. So that's what all the denominators have to be. So this one has the x minus 2. It's missing the x plus 4. This one has the x plus 4. It's missing the x minus 2. So multiply numerator and denominator by x minus 2. Now this one has both of them, so I don't need to fix that one at all. Now notice all of my denominators are the same, so I scratch through my denominators. So now I have x times x plus 4 minus 9 times x minus 2 equals x squared. So now distributing the x, I get x squared plus 4x. Then distributing the negative 9, remember the sign goes with the number. So that would be negative 9x, and then negative times negative gives me positive. 9 times 2 is 18. Now combining my like terms, I have x squared minus 5x plus 18 equals x squared. Now I see an x squared, and so I would want to set it equal to 0, so I'm going to subtract x squared from both sides. But notice that the x squareds cancel on both sides. So it turns out to just be a linear equation. Now go ahead and add the 5x, and I'll get 18 is equal to 5x, and then divide both sides by 5. So I get x is equal to 18 fifths. And again, I go back over here and I say, is that one of my restricted values? And no, it's not, so it is a good answer. So that's problem number 2. Problem number 3 is 9 over 5x minus 1 over 8 is equal to 3 over 4x. Now, notice that my common denominator, I don't have any addition or subtraction here. So my LCD, and what I'm doing is I'm looking for the number that all three of these numbers go into. And so that would be 40. and then I also need an x. And so this would be, if I make this not equal to 0, divide both sides by 40, and I get x is not equal to 0. So my only problem that I can't have is, only answer I can't have is 0. Now, if you want to just take the 5x and multiply it by the 8 and multiply it by the 4, you can do that. Okay, and so that will give you 160, and that's fine. It's just going to make your numbers big. But the actual common denominator is 40x. All right, so this one has a 5 and an x. To make this 40x, I would need to multiply it by 8. Again, I'm going to change this minus to a plus a negative. In order for the 8 to become 40x, it needs a 5 and an x. And in order for the 4x to become 40x, it needs a 10. And so this gives me 72. So now all of my denominators are 40x, so I can scratch through it. So I get 72 minus 5x is equal to 30. Subtract the 72, and I get negative 5x is equal to negative 42, and divide both sides by negative 5. So I get x is equal to 42/5. And again, that is not my restricted value, so this is a good answer. Okay, problem number 4. Let's say that I have x over 3 plus 1 over 3 is equal to negative 2. Now this would be over 1. And so my denominator will just be 3. My common denominator on my LCD is just going to be 3. Now 3 cannot equal 0, so I have no restricted values here. So this one's already 3, this one's already 3, this one needs the 3. So I'm going to multiply numerator and denominator by 3. And then I scratch the denominators. So I get x plus 1 is equal to negative 2 times 6. 3 is negative 6. Subtract the 1, and I get x is equal to negative 7. And there's your final answer. Okay, so that one was pretty easy. Problem number 5 says negative x over x minus 1 plus 1 over 2x plus 3 is equal to negative 1. So on this one, my LCD is just going to be this denominator times this denominator. And so I'm going to have x minus 1 times 2x plus 3 cannot equal 0. So x minus 1 cannot equal 0. Add the 1, and I get x cannot equal 1. And then I have 2x plus 3 cannot equal 0. So 2x cannot equal to negative 3 if I subtract the 3. And then divide by 2. So x cannot equal negative 3/2. Okay, so those are our two restricted values. So now, this one has the x minus 1. It needs the 2x plus 3. So I'm going to multiply over here, numerator and denominator, by 2x plus 3. This one has a 2x plus 3. It needs the x minus 1. So I'm going to multiply numerator and denominator by x minus 1. Now this is over 1, so it has nothing. So it's going to be, it's going to need both of them. So x minus 1 times 2x plus 3. Now, since this is negative 1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to FOIL this out first, and then I'll multiply in the negative 1. So it'll take me a couple of steps. So now all of my denominators are the same. So I'll scratch through my denominators. And I have x times 2x plus 3 plus 1 times x minus 1 is equal to negative 1 times x minus 1 times 2x plus 3. So negative x times 2x, negative 2x squared. Negative x times 3, negative 3x. 1 times x plus x. And 1 times negative 1, negative 1. And then I'm going to leave negative 1, and then I'm going to FOIL this out. So x times 2x is going to give me 2x squared. And x times 3 gives me plus 3x. Then negative 1 times 2x gives me negative 2x. And negative 1 times 3 gives me negative 3. So now I have negative 2x squared, and combining my like terms, minus 2x minus 1. And then again, in here, combining my like terms, I have 2x squared plus x minus 3. And so now I'm going to distribute the negative 1. So I'll just copy down this side of the problem. Negative 2x squared, negative 1 times 2x squared is negative 2x squared, negative 1 times x is minus x, and negative 1 times negative 3 gives me plus 3. And then notice again that if I add 2x squared to both sides, then it's going to cancel on both sides, and I'll still have just a linear equation. I have negative 2x minus 1 equals negative x plus 3. And so since the negative 2x is smaller than negative x, I will add 2x to both sides to get rid of some of these negatives. Or I could add x to both sides. Either way, it doesn't matter. So I'll get x plus 3. And then I subtract the 3 from both sides, and I get negative 4 is equal to x. And again, I go and check, is that a restricted value? And no, it's not. So I know I'm good. And so we'll do one more like this. So this will be problem number 6. And so I have negative 4 over x minus 4 minus 1 is equal to 2 over x plus 8. So again, notice that the LCD is just going to be these two denominators multiplied by each other. So it would be x minus 4 times x plus 8. And I want to see where those cannot equal 0. So x minus 4 cannot equal 0, so x cannot equal 4. And x plus 8 is not equal to 0, so x cannot equal 8, negative 8, subtracting the 8. And on some of the problems, they just ask what are the restricted values. And if that's the case, you can stop right there, and that's the answer. All right, but let's go ahead and finish up this problem. So this one is over 1, and again, remember, change that to plus a negative 1. So this one has the x plus 4. It needs the x, has the x minus 4. It needs the x plus 8. So numerator and denominator times x plus 8. This one doesn't have anything, so it needs both of them, x minus 4 and x plus 8. And then this one has the x plus 8. It needs the x minus 4. All right, so now all the denominators are the same, so I can scratch my denominators. So I have negative 4 times x plus 8 plus negative 1 times x minus 4 times x plus 8 is equal to 2 times x minus 4. And again, notice that I have 3 things multiplied here. So first I'm going to distribute this, then multiply in the negative 1. So negative 4 times x is negative 4x. Negative 4 times 8, negative 32. plus negative 1 times x is x squared, x times 8 plus 8x, negative 4 times x minus 4x, negative 4 times positive 8, negative 32, is equal to 2 times x is 2x, 2 times negative 4, negative 8. So now, combining my like terms here, I have negative 4x minus 32 plus negative 1 times x squared plus 4x minus 32 is equal to 2x minus 8. And now finally I will distribute my negative. So this would be negative 4x minus 32. And then I'll have negative times positive is negative x squared. Negative times positive is negative 4x. And negative times negative is plus 32. All right. So now let's combine my like terms. So first I'll have a negative x squared. Then I have negative 4x, and negative 4x gives me negative 8x. And then minus 32 here and plus 32 here cancels with each other. All right. So I'm going to try and make my x squared positive. So I'm going to bring it over to this side. So I'll add x squared and I'll add 8x because it has an x squared, so I will have to factor this one. This is the first one that I have to factor. So I'm going to add x squared and I'm going to add 8x. So I get 0 is equal to x squared plus 10x minus 8. Now, unfortunately, if I look at negative 8, that would be negative 1 times 8 or negative 2 times 4, and neither one of those gives me 10. So I'm going to have to use the quadratic formula on this one. So I would have x is equal to minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And here a is 1, b is 10, and c is negative 8. So this would be negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 10 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 8 all over 2 times 1. So that gives me negative 10 plus or minus, let's see, that would be 132 over 2. Now, let's see if we can simplify the square root of 132. So let's see if 4 goes into it. So 132 divided by 4 equals 33. So this would be the square root of 4 times the square root of 33. And then I can take the square root of the 4, that's 2. So 2 times the square root of 33. And then nothing except for 11 and 3 go into 33, and you can't take the square root of either of those, so we're good. So this would be negative 10 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 33 all over 2. Now the 2 is divided into both parts, so I'll divide it into both parts,